Hi, team. So, as you can hear from Timothy, a lot of interest in sort of the Asian market in two ways that he mentioned. One is as in terms of going to Asia, and second, also in terms of Asian families still being more engaged in high art, perhaps, than North American ones. And is there a way to tap into that? Now, that doesn't mean you should not also be looking at the tourism direction that you spoke of and that you even had one of your alternatives around. You should, but that you could see there was some skepticism around whether you could actually fuse the art forms and whether there'd be a market for that, and whether, one, it was desirable, and two, from an artistic standpoint, and two, whether there'd be a market. And so, take that into consideration. I should say, he did say that Pacific Opera Victoria has had trouble tapping into the Asian community. That doesn't mean you can't crack it. Perhaps by going through, but perhaps there's some good ideas in terms of what he was saying about children in music schools. I don't know, but I wouldn't say that means it's a no-go. It just means it's a concern, right? That's looking for an overcome. So what I'm going to do is I made notes here yesterday when I went through this on your paper, and I'm just going to go through them as I see them and as I wrote them, so they won't be as cohesive as something written. So, so my main comment is that I think, as I said earlier, I think okay, so I think you went with your intuition with Asia, and I think that was a good thing that you did that. But I don't think you've yet turned that intuition into what is your rationale. And once you articulate your rationale for why the idea of exploring an Asian direction resonated so much with you, I think that will lead you to your answer of what it will improve your recommendations. So let me tell you exactly what I mean. If you look at your proposal and your where you go into why your rationale for why you chose the problem statement that you did and the BHAG that you did, you don't really give a rationale. You say that you think the original problem statement of having young people was too limiting. So yes, I agree with that. But you then don't say, so why Asia? Just because young people might not be correct doesn't mean Asia is correct. And so I think you need to back that up with sort of, now that you've sort of used that right side of your brain to say, yes, this feels like a good direction, now bring in your left side to support why you think that. Okay? So I am not by no means denigrating your direction. I actually would encourage you in your paper to maintain it, not to let it go, but rather to think more deeply about the rationale behind it. So is it that you see something amazing in Asian art? Is it that you see a huge economic opportunity in the demographic, the tourism demographic? Is it that you see a huge opportunity in the at-home Asian communities? But you need to sort of say, what is it that sparked your imagination so much? And that needs to be, so that wasn't explained. And I'm not critiquing you for not explaining it. This is all just work in progress. I'm saying that I think that lack of an explanation is a symptom of you having not yet converged on your precise reasoning behind the very intuitive draw of Asia. I'm not saying you've done no research. I saw in assessing the situation that you've researched it, but one step of greater precision. And you did obviously research the actual shows. I could see that here. So, other thing, something small that I thought you did really well is that I thought you really acknowledged what they were already doing well. And that's important, of course, when talking to a client. Often when we're dealing with a case or we get so focused on the problem that we forget what's done well. So, okay. I just need a minute because some of the comments I gave you already. So I wrote here, I want to know what your evidence is that Asian tourists would be drawn to Asian opera if they came to Victoria. And I wrote here, if I were to go to China, the last thing I would go see is a hockey game, right? And so maybe it is true that there would be a draw, but you'd want to have some evidence for that, because it's not intuitive that is what people are coming, that is what tourists from abroad would want. On the other hand, people do tend to go to cultural events and spend money on shows more when they're traveling than when they're at home. So again, please take the critique as critique to strengthen, not critique as in throw away your idea. I did think, although Timothy did not respond, that he seemed to think there was not a market for Asian opera. I just wonder, and I think of some of the ideas you put in your linoid around broadcasting and that kind of thing. I wonder if there is an opportunity to fill a niche for opera lovers, for another kind of opera, if that you were to do some kind of Asian fusion or start producing Asian operas. I'm not sure whether there'd be an educational opportunity where you could be, POV could be the ones, because of the connection with the Pacific Rim, especially if there was a partnership in place, where they could actually play a world, an international role in educating on a different form of opera, kind of like the Met is doing. So that would be then serving a different demographic, not the Asian demographic, but rather those who are opera lovers. In terms of your process, as I go through your slides, you're assessing the situation. Excellent. Very, very thorough. I'm not sure. I didn't go back to your original linoid. I'm not sure if you edited what you put on the slide on the PowerPoint, but I was really impressed, if this isn't heavily edited, by the fact that you all seem to contribute quite a bit, that there didn't seem to be one color of sticky note that dominated. So if that is in fact true, I think that's really interesting to reflect on. On one hand, you could see the amazing divergence of ideas you got. On the other hand, being very democratic can make it more difficult to converge, right? You don't have that Steve Jobs up there saying, this is how you do it, what Steve says goes. So think about that. Let me keep going. What I found really interesting when I looked at your webbing, especially when you start looking at schools and media outlets, I found it really interesting that you dropped those directions entirely. And I don't want to even put a positive or a negative on that. I just want you to think about it. On one hand, that is hugely positive. So I gave the example in the webinar yesterday of Frank Gehry saying, crumpling it all up and throwing it away. And very few teams have the bravery to sort of go down a path and then say, you know what? We're going to throw that away and boldly go in this one direction. So I think I commend you for that. It says something about the team, and I'll be interested in learning from your papers what it says about your team, that you were able to do that. I don't see that very often. People often get very, very attached to a direction they come to fairly early. So, bravo for that. Yeah, I wrote in here brave in capital letters because I think it was. And on the other hand, you could ask the question, could you have salvaged some of that learning? I don't know. Ask the question in your paper. I would be curious with whatever your thoughts are. So you had your original BHAG. So again, what you see is a real leap into this Asian idea, that's coming about. I'm looking at slide 13 now, but we don't know why. Right? And that, to me, is sort of what came about throughout. And I did see reasons when I looked at your linoid, but they never came together in terms of clearly articulating why you thought it was so strong. And I think that's sort of the ghost that was haunting you a bit as you went forward, that there wasn't that clarity around why this was so compelling to you. So why was it so compelling? So what you wrote is voted and discussed which idea we wanted to move forward and agreed that attracting Asian and international visitors was our top choice. So that's really interesting, actually, because you're saying here that it was attracting Asian and international visitors. So then I would just ask the question, do you think an Asian opera is the best way to do that, or are there other ways? And do you want to explore Timothy's other idea around the domestic Asian community? So again, amazing ideas. I wrote that in terms of your exploring ideas on slide 15, I really love the idea with you competing with the Met, but for using a different type of show. In PPCO, we saw that you did raise many concerns, but you didn't. In terms of idea one, you didn't question the main premise: Asians would dig it. So, would they dig it? That's the $64,000 question. Again, I wrote impressed. I wrote amazing process, very democratic. That really, when I look at your process all the way along, process coordinator. I think I don't want to. I'm not sure if I should give Mark all the credit or not. I'm not sure if you took turns. I sort of know that Mark seemed to have taken a lead role there, but forgive me. Mark, please write me if I should be giving credit to somebody else. Great work. Now, in terms of assessment criteria, sorry, the slide is very small. So you had novelty. What I have here is, what do you mean by return on investment and sustainable, and is there overlap between them? So I'm not saying that those two are the same, but I'm saying that in your paper, please explain so I understand. The other thing is the one that does it align with the BHAG and problem statement. For the next round, please make that more specific. Instead of referring, so you refer to your BHAG and problem statement, but as I say, those aren't supported. So I would like you to actually not be self-referential in your criteria. Actually state what it is you're looking for. So if it's will it attract Asian tourists, then number of Asian tourists would be one. But I don't refer to your own BHAG. Actually state what it is that you're going for, that your criteria is. Okay? So, let me just look at my last slide, at your last slide. I think you made a really great decision in rejecting the social media idea, and I think for the precise reason that you say that it's generic. So social media is one that I never do any sort of live case where social media doesn't come up as a recommendation, which speaks to the fact that it's generic. So if you were going to do social media, you'd want that to be at the beginning of PPCO. It's kind of like that idea, that example I gave in the webinar of crowdsourcing, but it really has to be brought down to what kind of social media. That is a generic response. So good work in identifying that. And then we discussed the strengths and challenges, and so you didn't sort of blindly defer to the matrix. You had a discussion using the matrix as a basis. And what I wrote here is the fact that you could do this seems to be, from the outside, the sign of a healthy team. Hopefully I'll learn more about your process as you go. But the fact that you could engage in that kind of debate and come to a decision using the matrix as one point of data is really commendable for you. Those are all my comments for you, team. So hopefully that gives you enough to go on to write your paper. Great work. I will be very curious to read about your process because it was very rich and very deep and quite exceptional. So and I'll be curious to see where you take this recommendation. Please do let me know if you have questions. Bye-bye.